There's a moment, not loud, not violent, not even dramatic, when the world bends, not because it moved, but because something inside you cracked. It started as a sentence, a whisper, a single detail, a fact so quiet you almost didn't register it, but your brain did, and it never let go. Let's talk about the moment you learned something so wrong, so horrifying, so fundamentally dissonant with the world you thought you lived in, that your mind splits around it. Let's talk about psychological rupture, because trauma isn't always about what happens to you. Sometimes it's what you learn, what you discover, what you realize too late. The betrayal of knowing you were safe, you thought. You understood the rules, you thought. But now, you know something? That doesn't fit anywhere. And the mind, when it cannot fit something into its structure, has to rebuild the structure or collapse. Let's talk about the unbearable truth. It could be anything, something personal, something global, something historical, a truth about someone you love, a truth about what was done to others, a truth about what you once ignored. And once you see it, really see it, you feel it. There is no going back. Let's talk about cognitive trauma. Your brain is wired to predict, to build a stable world, to know what's safe, what's true, what's real. But this truth, it burns through those wires. It says, no, it's not what you thought. And suddenly, nothing feels stable. You question your memories. You question your beliefs. You question yourself. Because how could you have lived so long without seeing it? How could you have walked through life blind to this? Let's talk about epistemic collapse. The moment knowledge becomes a weapon against your identity. You were one person before you knew. Now you're someone else, but not by choice. It didn't evolve. It fractured. And in that fracture is the terror. If this is true, what else isn't? Let's talk about the silence that follows. You don't tell people. You can't. Because they still live in the before. They still trust what you no longer can. They still believe in what you now see as a lie. And so you isolate, not because you want to, because there's no language for what just happened to you. Let's talk about the irreversible shift. You walk the same streets, see the same faces, but it's all off. Colors feel flat. Voices feel scripted. Reality feels fabricated. You're not delusional. You're not broken. You're just no longer compatible with the version of reality you used to inhabit. Let's talk about trauma through information. You think trauma comes from violence or loss or terror, but sometimes it comes from knowing what they did, what you did, what the world allowed, what history erased, and now that knowledge lives in you. It replays, it shapes you, it rewrites you. Let's pause here. You thought growth was beautiful, that awakening was soft, that truth would set you free. But this truth, it broke something. And in that brokenness, you begin to see maybe the old self needed to die, because what you just learned is not something you get over. It's something you become. You try to wake up, but you're already awake. The world looks the same. The people are still smiling. The sky still turns. But you are different. Not scared, not angry, just gone. Let's talk about what happens after your mind is forced to hold something it was never built to hold. Let's talk about post-traumatic awareness. You're not screaming. You're not crying. You're observing with eyes too open, with silence that feels like it could break glass. Because once you've seen something horrific, once you've understood it, you can't unknow it. You stop asking, is the world good? And start asking, how much have we all agreed not to see? Let's talk about existential detachment. You laugh less. You move slower. You stare more, not because you're depressed, but because you feel outside of everything, as if the you that used to live inside this body is watching from somewhere else. You still eat, still talk, still perform, but you're not in it because now your brain is running two versions of reality at once: the surface version, what everyone still believes, and the hidden version, the one you saw, the one that changed everything. Let's talk about identity disintegration. Who you thought you were, gone. Your values, shaken. Your past, doubtful. Because now you see the cracks in the stories, in the systems, in the people you trusted, in yourself. You begin to ask, what else have I built my life on that wasn't real? Let's talk about narrative contamination. Even good memories feel different now. You look at a family photo and wonder what was hidden behind the smiles. You remember a mentor's words and hear the manipulation in them. You reread old journals and see how blind you were. You can't trust your own mind because it believed so easily for so long. Let's talk about derealization. You know you're here, but it doesn't feel like here. It's like watching a simulation, like the world is made of paper and polite delusion. You hear someone talk about justice and feel nauseated. You hear someone say everything happens for a reason and want to scream because you know better now. You know what the world actually allows, what people actually ignore. Let's talk about hyper-awareness. Your senses sharpen. You start seeing things no one else reacts to. Power dynamics, emotional microaggressions, quiet cruelty, systemic silence. It's not paranoia, it's clarity. But that clarity isolates you because most people don't want to see and they don't want you reminding them. Let's talk about the burden of knowledge. You thought knowing would make you stronger, wiser, sharper, but it also made you lonely. You look around and see people living in a world that's already dead to you. They still believe in it, still trust it, still need it. And you feel like a ghost inside their fairy tale. Let's pause here. You thought you'd come out of this enlightened, empowered, reborn, but instead, you've become something else: a witness, a carrier, a survivor of truth. And truth, when it's horrifying enough, doesn't just sit in your head, it rebuilds it. Now you are a mind with different architecture, and the person you were can never come back. You're still you, but no one sees it. They say you've changed, that you're distant, cold, different. But how could you not be? They didn't see what you saw. They didn't learn what you learned. They still believe the lie. And you don't know how to live inside it anymore. Let's talk about what happens when you change, but the world doesn't. Let's talk about post-cognitive behavior collapse. You used to laugh easily. Now it feels fake. You used to make plans. Now they seem pointless. You used to care what people thought. Now it feels absurd because your internal compass has been shattered, not by accident, but by awareness. The old map doesn't work anymore. The streets are wrong. The landmarks are burned, and no one else seems to notice. Let's talk about social incongruity. You're in a room, people are laughing, joking, debating, planning vacations, and you're sitting there, smiling politely, wondering how they can do this. Knowing what you now know, you start pulling away, not out of arrogance, not because you're better, but because it feels impossible to pretend anymore. Let's talk about emotional fragmentation. You feel too much and nothing at all. You see a story on the news and it destroys you. You hear someone talk about their trauma and feel paralyzed. Then Someone close to you cries and you feel nothing because your emotional system is now in conflict. It doesn't know how to prioritize, doesn't know what's appropriate, doesn't know where you begin anymore. Let's talk about moral disorientation. You used to have rules. You used to have standards, clear lines, right versus wrong, us versus them. Now, it's all blurred. You see the hypocrisy everywhere. In others, in yourself. You question every belief you once clung to. Even your morality starts to feel performative, inherited, contaminated. Let's talk about relationship collapse. People notice. They ask, what's wrong? Why are you like this lately? You try to explain. They don't get it. You say less the next time. Eventually, you stop trying. You ghost people. You drift away. You become the weird one. But how do you tell someone, I can't be who I was because I saw something that broke the way I exist? Let's talk about behavioral incoherence. You used to be consistent. Now you're unpredictable. One day you're quiet. The next, you explode. You isolate. Then overshare. You overwork. Then vanish. It's not mood swings. It's adaptation. Your nervous system is trying to re-regulate in a world that no longer makes sense. Let's talk about subtle recklessness. You drive faster. Sleep less. Say what you shouldn't. Break small rules. Stare into space. Not because you want to die, but because part of you has already detached from living. You are watching yourself now, from a distance, from behind glass. Let's talk about invisible grief. You're mourning, but not a person, not an event. You're mourning who you were, the version of you that could still smile without thinking, that could feel safe, that could believe in systems or people or purpose. That person is gone, and no one sends you flowers. No one says, I'm sorry for your loss, but it was a loss. It was. Let's pause here. You thought knowledge was power. That awakening was strength. But no one tells you what to do after the awakening breaks you. No one teaches you how to live after your foundation turns to dust. No one explains that survival after certain truths is a skill you have to invent. You thought you were healing, but healing implies a return, a path back to what you were, and now you understand something colder. You're never going back because what you knew before wasn't just innocence. It was structure. And the truth you learned didn't just wound you, it rearranged you. Let's talk about what it means to live with a mind that can't be rewound. Let's talk about identity reformation. After the collapse, after the panic, after the silence, you don't recover. You reconstruct, not from memories, not from dreams, but from what's left, the parts of you that didn't die, the small instincts, the voice that still whispers, keep going. But this new version of you, it's built on scorched earth. It's cautious, detached, colder in some ways, and yet more awake than it ever was. Let's talk about irreversible maturity. You see too much now. The world isn't a game. People aren't mysteries. You notice patterns others don't. You sense motives before they're spoken. You feel the temperature of a lie the moment it enters a room, and you wish you couldn't. You wish you could unsee. But knowledge doesn't ask for permission. It just settles in. Let's talk about emotional reconfiguration. You still feel, but differently. Less loudly, less automatically. Love feels like risk. Joy feels like a brief hallucination. Trust is measured in fractions. And pain feels familiar. It's the only thing that stayed. Let's talk about post-traumatic functionality. You get things done. You show up, you work, you listen, and no one suspects you're not fully here because your new self is efficient, resilient, unflinching, but also hollowed out, walled off, quiet in ways that words can't reach. Let's talk about the illusion of recovery. People say, you're doing so well now. You've come so far. And you nod because they need to believe that. And part of you does too. But the truth, you're not better. You're just adapted. Adapted to the noise, adapted to the weight, adapted to the fact that you carry something they'll never see. Let's talk about alien self-acceptance. Eventually, you stop trying to be you again. You accept that person is gone, dead in a sense, and you hold a quiet funeral, alone. You grieve the soft parts, the curious parts, the part that didn't flinch at shadows, and in that grief, you find clarity. You are not who you were. You are not who others expect. You are something after. Let's talk about the after self, the one that lives with the knowing. That doesn't seek comfort because comfort always costs too much. The one that smiles less, but sees more. The one that is honest, not because it's noble, but because dishonesty now tastes like poison. Let's talk about radical responsibility. You no longer wait for others to make sense of your pain. You no longer chase explanations. You carry what you know. You live around it. You protect others from it. Sometimes. And sometimes you drop pieces of it into conversation just to see who notices. Let's pause here. You thought the story would end in redemption, in light, in some great revelation that made the horror worth it. But maybe the truth is darker. Maybe there is no lesson, no gift, no meaning. Maybe the only thing you gain is the ability to keep walking with a mind that no longer matches the world around you. And maybe, just maybe, that is its own kind of power.